Hey y'all, welcome to today's episode on the Playmaker podcast. I want to ask you a question that you may or may not know the answer to, but I want to know, are you disqualifying yourself? Now, when we hear that, as playmakers, we're like, girl, no, we're playmakers. I'm out here doing all this stuff. I am thriving. I'm leading. I'm accomplishing all these things. I'm not disqualifying myself. But I want to really think about that. Are you actually disqualifying yourself, or are you disqualifying someone else? And maybe you don't even realize it. I've been going through Paul's letters in the New Testament in my daily quiet time. And one of the things that I'm reminded by, because he always starts his letters addressing who he is and telling us that he is Paul and he was called by God to be doing what he's doing. And if you know Paul's story, you know that he came to be one of the first apostles, but before that, he was actually out killing Christians and doing anything he could to stop the spread of the gospel until, of course, he met Jesus, and Jesus changes everything, right? So now he is out, he is planting churches, he's making disciples, and he is fulfilling what the Lord had asked him to do and what the calling on his life was. So in 2 Corinthians, I love this book because Paul is basically defending his credibility to the church of Corinth, okay? And in verse 11:6, because basically, background, Paul is a nobody. Paul used to be a somebody and has chosen to be a nobody, basically. He is not rich. There's nothing fancy about him. He's homeless. But he's going out and he is not living for this world. He was living for the next life. And so there was nothing fancy about him. Well, the Church of Corinth is a church that he had planted. Well, then all these different fancier and wealthier and better spoken people started coming in and trying to teach kind of a twisted version of the gospel. And these people are buying into it because these people dressed like the leaders. They looked like leaders. They talked like leaders. And so then they began to follow them. And Paul heard of this and was like, what are you doing? Because they were basically saying, like, Paul, you're not all this, so why should we trust you? Why should we follow you? So Paul, being the very humble guy that he is, had to actually defend his credibility with these people and answer these critics. And he calls himself out in chapter 11, verse 6, after he has just basically defended his credibility to these people. He says, I may indeed be untrained as a speaker, but I do have knowledge. So as soon as I read that, I thought about Moses, because if you know Moses' story, the Lord had asked him to go speak to the Pharaoh, to the king, to say, let my people go. And after he asked, when the Lord told him to do this, Moses' first response in Exodus chapter 4, verse 10, says, Moses said to the Lord, pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. So he's disqualifying himself here. The Lord's just told him what to go do. And Moses is like, oh, but I can't do that. He's disqualifying himself. In verse 11, the Lord said to him, who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will help you speak and will teach you what to say. Verse 13, but Moses said, pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else. No one discredited or disqualified Moses. He's the only one that did that. Moses disqualified himself. Yet when we look at the life of Paul, it's the complete opposite. There's a whole group of people disqualifying Paul. And if you're just using their eyes, it made sense. Like, he didn't look the part. And the crazier thing is, knows he's not qualified. He says it in verse 6, I may indeed be untrained as a speaker. He knew he didn't sound the best. He didn't have the fancy words. It didn't flow and like roll right off his tongue. He realizes, though, that in his weakness, the Lord is strong. And so while he's not qualified himself, he is qualified because of the person who Jesus is inside of him. Therefore, he goes on and he says, I do have knowledge. I may indeed be untrained as a speaker, but I do have knowledge. So you know what Paul does? He speaks. Regardless of everyone around him trying to disqualify him, saying, you're not good enough, Paul pressed on because he saw his own weakness, but he knew that he was strong in Jesus. Therefore, he still spoke. So I want to ask you again, what have you disqualified yourself from? What is something that maybe the Lord has called you to do, or a dream that he's sown in your heart that you know you're supposed to do, but you're like, man, that's too big. I can't do that. I don't speak well enough. I'm not cute enough. I'm not strong enough. What is it? What are you disqualifying yourself from? And then an even deeper question, who else are you disqualifying? I was in a conversation not too long ago about future leaders in a group that I'm in, and we were talking about some potential people that we saw could be really good leaders. And I brought up some red flags that I saw, and I disqualified them. The Lord convicted me later that week, and I had to go back to that group of people and apologize and repent and ask for their forgiveness because I was seeing their abilities and their weaknesses through my eyes rather than seeing the hand of God on their heart and in their lives, which is so much bigger and so much stronger and so much more able than anything we could do on our own. Even if we had the best leader possible, God's hand on an unqualified person is always better because he is that big and that in control. Our perspective doesn't need to be focused on the qualifications of ourselves or of others, but rather on the hand of God in our life and in their life. Don't minimize his power. That's my encouragement to y'all today. Stop disqualifying yourself because you were created on purpose and for a purpose. So go step into that purpose and do and fulfill and chase after whatever it is that the Lord has sown into your heart. Don't come up short, guys. Press in, press on. Go do something to get 1% better today.